And thank you all for joining us today. I am Zuri Johnson, Leadership Development Manager at the Leadership Louisville Center, where our purpose is to inspire and equip leaders to be better and do better. We've been growing the connections, confidence, and courage of leaders for over 40 years now, and these microlearning sessions are our newest offering. Our speaker this morning is Dr. Asa James Swan. Asa is the founder and CEO of Great Leaders, a dynamic leadership-focused organization dedicated to creating gritty, relational, equipped, authentic, and transformational leaders through coaching, training, and consulting. Asa previously served as the first ever Chief Leadership Officer for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which was also the first in the nation. I want you all to know we will be utilizing the chat function today. If you have questions for Asa as we go along, please throw those in the chat and we will be sure to get to them at the end. Please join me in welcoming Asa.
Good morning, everyone. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Like Zuri said, I'm Dr. Asa James Swan, and I'm really excited to be with you this morning. In fact, it's a real honor to partner with Leadership Louisville. So today's talk is entitled Finishing Strong in a Disruptive Year. And I don't need to tell you all how crazy and turbulent 2020 has been. I used to be a history professor, and I spent 8 years teaching world history, French Revolution, things like that. And I honestly think that 2020 will have its own chapter in the history books. And since the year's not over yet, maybe 2 chapters. So we'll see how it goes. So with that in mind, what began in March as an interruption in our lives really did turn into a serious disruption of everything that we were doing. So as the end of this year approaches, it might be tempting for us as leaders to just take it easy and rest and relax the rest of the year. But I don't think we should do that. You see, as leaders, it is our responsibility to end well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Ending well means doing those important things that must be addressed before 2021 begins. This session will encourage and equip you to end well by providing strategies and practical suggestions for you and your organization to set you up to finish this year strong and then go into next year with the goal of greater success for 2021. In short, I just want you to have the tools you need to be unleashed to do the best you can and finish out this year with excellence. All right, so this talk is divided into 3 parts. First, we're going to talk about the end. Second, we're going to talk about you. And then third, we're going to talk about them. So we begin with the end. We place great importance on how things end, don't we? It has more weight than any other part of the story. The end always gets a footnote, especially if it differs from the beginning and from the middle. The best stories always have powerful endings. And we know that, right? Because when you're telling a great story, and let's say, it's a little long, what do we always say? Hey, wait for it, wait to the end. The end is worth the wait. You're going to want to hear about this, what I've got to share at the very end. Now, most often, we remember the end more than any other part of what happened. And that's probably why Stephen Covey reminds us to begin with the end in mind. It's what people remember the most. I've seen a lot of this at work in the past several years. And so I want to tell you about 2 people that used to be under my supervision as an example of this point. The first is Jeff, and I've changed their names. So Jeff at KYTC, he was one of my first hires when I served at the Transportation Cabinet as Chief of Staff for about 3 years. Jeff started out with a bang. He was a great interview. We were so excited to get him on our team. We put him down with his own team, and for a couple years, he did a great job. He worked hard. He accomplished much of the vision that he had for his area. But then unfortunately, things began to change, and in the space of about 2 months, it all fell apart, and Jeff did not end well. In fact, it was so bad that we actually had to let him go. Now, here's the thing. Up until that point, everything that he had done had been great and had been laudatory, and people were cheering him on. But then, guess what happened after he left? The number one thing I heard was not, oh, he did such a good job. It was, whatever happened to Jeff? Why did he end so badly? We remembered the end. Now, let me tell you about Phil. Phil was a student of mine at Lindsay Wilson, and he was not a good student. Didn't do his homework, fell asleep in class a lot, had a bit of an attitude, and after a rough intervention between me and him, he decided for his last month that he wanted to pass the class, which at that point he was failing spectacularly. And I said, well, I would love to help you. How can I help you do that? And do you know that for that whole month, he got A's and B's on everything, and he even got an A on the final, which was hard. And because he got an A on that final, because it was weighted the most of everything that we did that semester, it pushed him just barely into the zone of passing, and Phil got a D. So when I think of Phil, what I remember most was not how he started or the middle, the attitude, falling asleep in class, no matter how hard I tried in my lectures to keep everybody with me. I remember the last month and how he ended and how we finished there in my class. Now, lastly, I want to tell you a more personal story about how we should end well. So I've been best friends with my friend Noah since we were 13. So that's 28 years now. We were both homeschooled that year. That's how we became friends. And we've been close ever since. Well, when we were 15, Noah got some really bad news. And it was that his dad had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And so for 8 months, his dad fought lung cancer as hard as he could. And unfortunately, like so many wonderful people that you and I know, he lost his battle. But the point of this story is what he did during those 8 months. Now, he had always been a good dad. Noah always knew that his dad loved him. But his dad took those last 8 months, and you know what he did? He spent every waking minute with the people that mattered most to him in his life, his wife and his 2 sons. And so every time I came over, they were playing baseball. They were outside walking around, just enjoying the fresh air. They were playing board games, which was a family favorite. They were having delicious meals that his dad was helping cook, and just talking about all the fun things in life. And so guess what Noah remembers when he thinks about his dad? That's right, he remembers the end. He remembers how his dad gave everything he could in his last months just to love on his sons and on his family. Ending well matters. So end well. As leaders, we can finish 2020 strong by leading ourselves and our teams well in these last few weeks. Now you might be thinking, Asa, how do I do that after such a turbulent, disruptive year? Well, let me encourage you with key point number 1. And this talk has 3 key points. So we're going to send you all a one-pager after this, laying out some of these things if you're unable to take notes right now. Key point number 1 is this. Even though the modes of work have changed this year, the fundamental needs of our teams have not. What they needed before COVID-19 began is still fundamentally what they need from us as senior leaders. And so because dynamic leadership in the 21st century workplace begins with you and me, I want to spend some time talking about leading ourselves. So Zuri mentioned that the G in great leaders represents gritty. And by gritty, we're talking about leading ourselves. Now, you're the hardest person that you're ever going to lead. And I'll tell you, I know this, you all, because 27 years ago, I realized that I had a leadership problem. And that's because I was a freshman in high school, and I decided to run for freshman class president. Now, I was nerdy. I was kind of that nerdy, hopefully nice kid. And I thought, hey, student government's kind of up my alley, kind of for the nerdy kids who like government stuff. And so I declared to run. And to my horror, A few days after I declared to run, I kid you not just one, but both co-captains of the cheerleading squad decided to run for freshman class president as well. Well, I can't beat them. How am I supposed to beat the cheerleaders? And so for 3 weeks, there was this hot and heavy, almost like Mean Girls the movie level race, where the three of us were duking it out to try to win. All right, so the election comes, we have the election, and we have to wait a week for the results. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting there in homeroom. And by the way, both of these girls were in my homeroom. So the three of us are all sitting there glaring at each other, wondering who's going to win this thing. And they started giving the results from the seniors all the way down to the freshmen. So I had to wait. Like I'm just waiting with bated breath at what is going to happen. And I kid you not, they said freshman class officers, the role of president will not be announced today. So the three of us look at each other. This is the first time we've been united about anything in a while. And we were like, what gives? Then they go on and they announce the vice president and the treasurer and the secretary. So here's the rest of the story, which I found out over 15 years later from a friend of mine that I met later who was involved in what happened behind the scenes. So all three of us got the same number of votes. We tied. It was a three-way tie. So don't ever let anybody tell you your vote doesn't matter, because it does. So it's a three-way tie, and the principal and the teachers didn't know what to do. So they actually recounted it twice. So they finally said, well, we've got a three-way tie, let's take it to the school board. So they took it to the school board, and this is what happens in that week between when they said, we're not gonna tell you, and then eventually we find out. So the school board, they're all standing there, and they recount the votes, same number of votes for the three of us. So then they're like, well, do we have them come in and flip a coin? Like, well, that doesn't really work because it's three. All right, can they draw straws? So the school board, someone on the board said, okay, let's just check one last time. And you all, as they counted a final time, a hidden ballot that had been attached underneath another one fell down. And guess who it was for? Me. So I won freshman class president by one vote in this big victory for the proletariat. No, I won, and it was great. So here's the thing. Did I run to be this, great servant leader who puts everybody else first and helps, guarantee their success? No, I was 14. I just wanted to be freshman class president. I thought it might make me a little bit cooler, which would help with girls and, and all that. So anyway, but getting more serious here, I remember thinking to myself after I won, well, I don't know how to lead people. How do I begin to lead? And my friends, that's when I began to really study leadership. In fact, I consider the beginning of my lifelong journey of being a student of great leadership and just what that means to lead yourself, lead others, lead any room that you're in, provide world-class service in all you do, and finally build healthy, dynamic cultures, which is what we do at Great Leaders. Now, I had to learn how to lead myself in order to be used as an effective leader. And why is that? And you all know the answer to this, because as the leader goes, so goes the team. If I don't fill my well, then I can't be poured out. And the thing is, you can't give what you don't got. Our teams, they draw from the overflow of our lives. And that's why what we do to lead ourselves and throughout the week, make sure that we keep filling our tanks back up is so important. Self-care sounds very selfish, but it's actually not. It is incredibly important for leaders. As we fill back up, then we have something to give as we pour out into others. The best leaders intentionally do the daily work of filling themselves back up. Now, I don't mean every day we fill all the way back up to the top. I just mean that we have a plan where we've intentionally thought about this. What helps me? Like, do I go outside and spend some time in nature? Do I spend some time with my kids? Do I listen to music? I've listened to classical music a lot. In fact, I started doing this as a professor to help me stay calm when I was grading. So classical music helped me stay calm. I also use this in the car, by the way, with trying to deal with crazy drivers. And don't get me started on how I'm convinced that the lockdowns have made us even worse drivers. Okay, so lockdowns and quarantines have made it especially hard to do these refueling things. So let me throw out 3 big questions for us today to consider as we grow grittier and become more gritty in leading ourselves. So first, if I asked you right now, how are you doing? What would you say to me? How are you doing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? Seriously, what in the quiet of your mind, what would you say? As 2020 ends, what do you need to do to fill yourself back up during the week? What disciplines, patterns, treats, just events, things, what is it that you can do to just help do that self-care, which is so crucial for a leader? Some of you have probably heard this story, but Jack Welch was famous for his 1-hour stare out the window appointment that he had on the schedule every day. So he's up there on the top of a skyscraper, there for GE, looking out the window for an hour. And he would sit there with a notepad and he would just process and let things float up into his mind. And he would write good ideas down and it would just let him breathe. When I was chief of staff at transportation, we had almost daily crises that we had to deal with. And I would do what I called coming out for air. I would walk out of my office, I would walk to the front of the building. We were there on the 6th floor, and I would just look out over downtown Frankfurt and the Capitol in the distance. It's a beautiful view. Sometimes it'd be snowing, or if it was in the summer and there's a thunderstorm coming, and I would just take some deep breaths and I would just take a moment to center myself and allow myself just the gift of taking it easy for a little bit. And then I go back to work. All right. So again, what do you need to do to fill your tank? Now, let me borrow a great question from one of my favorite leadership thought leaders, Joe Saxton. Joe Saxton asks us this: if your body could talk to you, what would it say? So if your body could speak to you right now, and don't worry, no one else is listening, what would it say to you? So if my body might be like, Asa, I am way too stressed. And I can do this level for a while, but I cannot do this long term. I'm going to start to shut down. It might say, Asa, I need more sleep. Just sleep more. Find ways to nap. Go to bed a little earlier. Stop binge watching on Netflix. That's not hypothetical. You might need to, Asa, maybe exercise a little more. Or Asa, could you please eat a vegetable? What is it that your body might say to you right now? You only have one body and your leadership lives in it. So it is crucial to take care of that because we need you. We need good leaders right now more than ever. And the people around you need you too. It's time for us to take time, to make the time to pay attention to our bodies and have intentional self-care. So that's my first big question. Here's my second big question to you today. What voices are you listening to? As you go through your week, what voices are you listening to? Because God knows 2020 has a lot of voices in it. Angry ones, fearful ones, wise ones, foolish ones. There's a lot of voices out there. What voices are you listening to? Because here's the thing. If you told me what voices you're listening to, I can tell you who you're becoming. This is because we become what we think. Over time, we really do begin to believe that those voices, they shape our leadership. And that's why Muhammad Ali talked about this all the time. What you're thinking is what you're becoming. So choose to listen to encouraging, edifying, equipping voices of hope and grace and wisdom. Can I just encourage you to think, just take some time and think through what am I listening to all day? What am I putting in? Is it helping me or is it making things worse? And I know that we can't cancel every voice that we have in our lives. There might be a couple coworkers we would love to hit the mute button on, but just in general, what can we do to put some amazing, fueling voices that can speak into our own lives? All right, So that's the second big question. Here's the last one for us this morning as we talk about leading ourselves. Who are you doing life with, even during a pandemic? If I've learned anything in 27 years of studying leadership, it's that community really matters. You know, we're not meant to be lone rangers as much as that American ideal is popular, like the old Western, cowboy. But because community actually benefits us in so many ways. When it supports us when we're weak, when we need to lean in, it cheers us on, it refreshes us in the deep places of our lives. And don't miss this, your people are the other voices that you're listening to. Your friends and family are speaking into your lives, either for good or for ill. So who are your people? Who are you doing life with, even during a pandemic? Community also counteracts one of the great surprises of leadership that a lot of people don't expect until they become the senior leader, and that's the loneliness of leadership. And my guess is several of you right now are nodding your heads because you know what I'm talking about. When you become the senior leader, all of a sudden, it's on you. And there is a true loneliness that can come from the weight of that responsibility because you have to make the call. Ultimately, you have to decide who goes and who stays, how we get through this crisis, how we're going to fix this budget issue, what we're going to do next to deal with this customer or meet this order. Whatever it is, there's a loneliness to that. And community counteracts that loneliness and lets us know that even though I feel alone in this decision, I am not alone in this decision. I am not alone in this because there are people around me that are for me, they're cheering me on, and they believe in me, even in those moments where maybe I wobble a little and I don't always believe in myself. So let's commit together to building strong relationships and friends as 2020 ends by making time for authentic community. All right, so those are our three big questions we think about leading ourselves. Ending 2020 well means intentionally doing those practices that refuel and refresh you for tomorrow's leadership challenges. So lastly, I just want to ask you all on this point, what does ending well look like for you personally? So just again, the quiet of your mind, what does this look like for you? And I want you to take some time today, maybe over lunch or after work today, just to sit for 15 minutes and think, what would this look like for me personally? Not talking about your team or your organization or your family, but for you. How can I have some good self-care? Because this is especially important as we begin to transition to talking about them, because how we lead ourselves directly affects how we lead others. And that leads us to key point number 2. So key point number 2 is something that those of you who know me have heard me say many, many times. And that's because I believe this is the beginning of all leadership training. Like if I have 1 minute to talk in a room or share with people, this is what I talk about, and this is what it is. Everyone takes their cues from the senior leader. Everyone takes their cues from the senior leader. We watch the leader and observe what he or she does. We look at that leader and the cues that they give off, and those cues define our culture, the values that are important in that workspace. That leader, like a thermometer, sets the temperature. And culture is so key, but you all know that culture is so key to the, we don't do work in a vacuum. We do it in a culture. And so cultures then are either going to be good and healthy and dynamic, or toxic and negative and bad. And it's very intentional. And we're going to talk about now that for a little bit. If the senior leader is angry and cynical and doesn't like to be interrupted and critical of everything, guess what happens? The senior leadership team begins to follow the leader into that place. And those values trickle down into the culture. And then guess what happens? Retention begins to go down. And people begin to get snippy and angry. And now you're not dealing with the work, you're dealing with interpersonal things because the culture is so toxic. Or the senior leader, if the senior leader is caring, trying to believe the best, trying to be patient, can be interrupted in what they're doing. Hey, I've got this big thing, but you know what? I can give you 3 minutes. What do you need? Go ahead. And then if we need to do more later, we will. I'll give you what I've got. That's where the culture will go. It will go up into that place of being healthy and encouraging and affirming. So all of this about everyone takes their cues from the senior leader explains the statement that we all hate, and that's this one. Well, that's just not how we do it around here. Is that in the manual? Is it written down anywhere? No. So how do they know what we do around here? So for example, let's say I'm new, and let's say it's, we'll use Zuri, and it's Zuri's birthday tomorrow. And I'm like, gosh, we've got to celebrate Zuri's birthday. It's a big one. She loves birthdays. What do you think? And they're like, oh, no, we don't do birthdays here. Okay, I guarantee you that's not written down in the handbook. So how do they know that? Because it's coming from the senior leaders. Now, on the flip side, what if I'm like, hey guys, you know what? Let's flash forward 6 months. Let's say that we're all safely past COVID, whatever that looks like. And I'm like, you know what? We've all been apart. Now we've got a ton of work to do, but can we do a potluck? Let's just do 2 hours one day where we get to be together, reconnect as friends and coworkers. And they're like, that sounds great. Like, let's do that. That flows from the senior leadership team because we're taking their cues from them. How does everybody know what's allowed and what isn't? The cues the senior leader gives off. So let me ask you, what cues are you giving off? Now, if you don't know what cues you give off, and that's okay, because this can be a bit of a blind spot for people, because here's the thing, you are giving off cues. You are, whether you know it or not. That's the terrifying thing about it, is you might not realize what cues you're giving off, and we're going to talk about how to help with that. But here's the thing, if you don't know what cues you're giving off, guess who does? Everybody else. Everybody else knows what the cues are that you're giving. What are the corporate values and social rules that aren't written in your organization, yet everybody knows? You see, when our teams don't know what our leadership philosophy is, guess what? They will guess, and they fill in the blanks in what I call the ghost rules. The invisible narrative, which nobody wants. This lack of clarity invites disaster and toxicity into a culture. The best leaders consistently articulate healthy, empowering cues and a clear vision that define for everybody, here is what matters here. Here is what we value. And this is why it's a part of our vision and where we're going. So let me ask you this. If you're terrified right now, please don't be terrified. How can you find out what cues you're giving off if you don't know? Well, let me encourage you. Find somebody that you trust. Who's somebody that you know is for you? And then go to them and just say, hey, I want to work on I want to grow my self-awareness, because that's what it takes. And then, again, another thing to encourage you guys, self-awareness can be grown. You know those people that have none? Well, you know what? They actually could get better, because it just takes, it takes intentionality to learn, like, well, hey, when I said this, how did that sound to you? When I did this, in the words of Brene Brown, what's the story in your mind that developed when you heard me say this? And then let them give you that feedback. So anyway, you guys, I want to just encourage you can go to them and then let them give you that feedback. And you know what, if you can only take one thing per month, great. Take one thing and work on it. And by the way, I bet you have a lot of good cues that you're giving off. Let me give you a quick example of a cue that I was unaware of that I was giving off. So I worked on Capitol Hill not long after I left college. If any of you have ever worked on Capitol Hill or you've been there, you know that people are flying through those halls. They're moving fast. Now, the truth is, they might not need to be. It's probably a lot of posturing and an act, especially because it's mostly 20-somethings like I was in. We're getting paid nothing, but we're also helping all these powerful people make big decisions. It's kind of a fun trade-off. So everybody's walking really fast. So even though I'm from Campbellsville, Kentucky, and I'm a Southerner, as you can see from my bow tie, I began to walk very quickly. And I still do, Because, and this might be the theater minor in me, but when I walk somewhere, I walk with a purpose. So like I cross the stage with a purpose, so I walk with a purpose. When I got hired on as chief of staff, I told everybody, come see me. What do you need? Hey, you can always ask me for something, just interrupt. But I noticed that when people would, it was like this. Hey, Asa, is this okay? Can I ask you something? I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. What do you need? What's going on? And it kept happening. I started getting really frustrated. Why is everybody approaching me on eggshells? And one day, one of my friends who had also worked on Capitol Hill said, Asa, I think people do that because you're flying past them down the hallway as though there's a huge emergency or you need to go to the bathroom. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's true. I'm in the left lane passing everybody all the time just because I'm moving here to there trying to take care of this crisis, fix this thing, help this guy, whatever. But it's the cue I'm giving off is I'm important and I can't be interrupted. And the thing is, I can be interrupted. So I began to slow down, only walk that fast when there was a crisis, and really let people know, yeah, what do you need? And just double down on, please interrupt me. I'm your chief of staff. I'm chief of staff. I am here to help serve you and empower you. All right, so just some questions as you think through cues. Are you patient? I've used this one a lot because it speaks a lot to power dynamics. Can you be interrupted when you're hard at work? Do you celebrate people's successes and encourage them when they fail? Are they allowed to fail in your culture? Is that something that's encouraged or is it condemned in your culture? What kind of culture do you want? I want transformative cultures. I want to work in a transformative culture that unites and honors and empowers everybody in my organization. So, okay, so here's the summary of everyone takes their cues from the senior leader. And it's really just become the leader that other people would want to follow. Who would you want to follow? What are some senior leaders you've been under what did you love about them? And then for the bad ones, here's just a fun thing, interactive on Zoom. I can only see about 6 or 7 of you, but will you raise your hand if you've ever had a bad boss? Okay, everybody that I can see, raise their hand. Most of us have had a bad boss, and you tell me, and I'll just believe I can hear you through Zoom, what is the one really good thing about a bad boss? That's right. We learn what not to do, right? We all sat there thinking, well, if I'm ever the leader, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this. And you know what? That's actually positive, right? Like we can learn from their mistakes, and it helps us be a better leader, even though we're suffering under them. All right. So that's our piece on leading ourselves. So now I want us to begin to focus on them, our teams, and ending 2020 well and how we lead others. So the R in GREAT stands for relational, which is leading others. I want to just take time, I want to camp out on just one crucial truth for the rest of our time as we look at leading others. And that's key point number 3, which is take time to find new ways to add value to your teams every day. And that's because, my friends, everyone, even the most prickly pear in your organization, has a need to be both known and valued. Everybody. Even the ones who try to pretend that they don't need anything, they do. They might not need a parade. They might not need a big deal. In fact, a lot of people don't want a big deal made about them, but they need to know that you see them and you value them. And we're going to talk about that. So when I say for key point number 3, take time to find new ways to add value to your teams every day. Let me tell you what I mean by valuing. Because I used to think valuing was only one part. And actually there's 2. So it's both seeing people, and then anyone want to guess what the other one is? Pretty simple. Hearing them. So when I say seeing them, I just mean them saying to us, hey, do you see me? Do I matter to you, like what I'm doing over here? Because, I came to work for you. I came to work in this organization, and I'm bringing the best of what I've got, at least initially, because nobody goes to work to be mediocre, at least at the start. I want to join in this grander vision that you have. So Do you see me? And then if the answer to that is yes, then the second question is, all right, well, that's good. Hey, do you hear me? Does what I say, is it important enough for you to listen to me? Now, here's the great secret about listening to people. You don't have to do what they say. You really don't. Not every time, but you value them enough to listen. Like, hey, I hear you. Yeah, that's a really good point. Let me think on that. And sometimes it might be the best idea you've heard all day. And you're like, well, I'm really glad I asked them because I wouldn't have thought of that. So valuing is both seeing and hearing. And I want to tell you all a story that really brought this home to me as a leader. So when I worked at Lindsey Wilson College for 8 years as a history professor, my direct report was a nice person, I would say a good person, who was not a good leader. She did not know how to lead people. And so we just kind of got used to that. And I just knew I had to do a good job over here and I'll get some good feedback from my students. And that's going to be enough. In fact, by the way, just on everyone takes their cues, guess when we as a faculty only heard from her? When something was wrong or she didn't like something that we were doing. That was the cue that she gave off. So guess what nobody liked? Hearing from this person, which is too bad because one-on-one, she could actually be nice to spend time with. But that was her cue. Now on the flip side, our senior leader, the CEO of the whole college, the president, Dr. Bill Lucky, who's still president there, was the opposite. Bill has amazing relational intelligence. Bill is very good at valuing people. And in my 5th year there, we were at faculty retreat. And so as usual, I'm at my laptop, I'm working on my syllabi, and yeah, I'm listening, but I'm multitasking. And the president came, and he was spending an hour with us at our retreat. And he said, he was talking, all of a sudden he said, hey, can I have the eyes of the room? Can everybody look up here at me? Well, now we're really interested, because he's never said this before. I pushed my laptop back, and I was like, are some of us going to get fired? Or, are we going to get a raise? No, we're not getting a raise. All right, so he began to talk, and here's what he said. He said, guys, I know that a lot of you don't think I know what you do here. Because as president, I'm traveling around the country. I'm raising money for Lindsey Wilson. I'm dealing with our trustees. I'm trying to bring new donors in. I do all this kind of work that's not on campus. But I'm here at least 3 days a week, and I make a point every day that I'm here to have a meal with your students. So several times a week, your students tell me about your classes, and I hear about what you're doing, how you're teaching, what you're teaching them, what they think about it. I hear about what you do with our sports teams. I hear about how you help our classes and our clubs and organizations. And then he paused and he looked at us and he said, and I see you and you matter to me. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would describe myself on a little more of the sensitive side of men. But I'm really not a crier. But I started crying in faculty retreat. Now, crying in faculty retreat probably isn't that unusual because it was never great. Okay, but I'm crying and I had to push back from my table with my fellow faculty because I was embarrassed. And I thought to myself, why am I crying in the middle of faculty retreat? And my friends, the answer is because it had been 5 years since my direct report, my senior leader spoke value into me. And the thing is, when Bill said, I see you and you matter to me, I believed him. It was genuine and it was intentional. And the power of that story changed my leadership. And that's why I care deeply about valuing people, because folks, I needed that. I didn't realize until he said it how much I needed it, but I needed that. And also, by the way, for the 5 love languages, I'm a words guy. Words of affirmation, very important to me. So, okay. So if any of you right now are having any doubts and you're like, Asa, I'm introverted. I'm not great at seeing people. I'm not great at dealing with people. I want to do this. I do, but I don't know how. Let me encourage you with John Maxwell's 3 questions that every potential follower puts to a leader. So here's the first one. Do you like me? do you like me? I'm not going to follow someone that doesn't like me. Why would I do that? Like, I'm not going to do that. So do you like me, which is compassion. And if we can say, yes, I like you, then their next question is this. Okay, good. Can I trust you? Can I trust you? Because I've been burned in the past. Can I trust you? And that's a character issue. And if we can then again say, yes, you can trust me, I'm for you, then the last question is this. All right, well, can you help me? Can you help me as my senior leader? I want to advance too in my career. I also have dreams. I came here to join you. I'm giving you part of my life, this season of my life, to help you in your grander vision. Can you help me? Which is about competence. And if we can say, yes, not only can I help you, I will help you. I will cheerlead you. I will give you what I've got and help you and get to your next step in your career and go along that way. Then guess what? They will follow you. You don't have to be Mr. or Mrs. super nice, super happy, joyous person. But if they know you are for them, it doesn't mean you have to give them everything. They know you can't give them everything. They know you can't give them a 20% raise. Maybe you can't even do 3%. But if you can say, look, all I've got, this is where we are budget-wise here. I'm going to give you what I've got. It's a $250 bonus. They will think, you know what? Our senior leader did what he or she could because they value me. And that's enough. So, all right. So as we finish out, I'm a real big believer in practical suggestions. I always, bristle when someone teaches and they're like, be a good leader, see ya, and then they're gone. Here are some practical suggestions for daily life that we can bring into our work environment. All right, so here we go. 4 practical suggestions for adding value to people as 2020, the crazy year, comes to a close. Number 1 is empower them. Empower them. Let your teams be bold and creative and take risks. Now, by taking a risk, that means, as you well know, they could fail. Some of you can't understand why your teams never take any risks. Oh, why can't they be creative? Think outside of the box just once. Can you guys help me here? I've already thought of this. I need some creative ideas. May I humbly suggest to you that if you want to get away from, well, that's the way we've always done it, it might be because your team feels like they can't go there without being condemned or punished, or there's some kind of negative connotation with being the one to step out. Alan Mulally has this amazing story about this big acquisition that they were thinking about taking at Ford. And when they were done, after this big discussion, they were all in agreement. And he looked around and he said, gentlemen, thank you for your thoughts. But because we were all in agreement, I want us to go back and reconsider this entire decision, and somebody come back to me tomorrow with a good reason why we shouldn't do this. He was trying to encourage them, and this is safe for someone to stand up to me and say, no, boss, look, great idea, but here's why we shouldn't do it. And then so that they really think on it. All right. By the way, I love this because earlier in his career, when he first came to Ford, trying to save Ford, when he walked, this is just so interesting, he walked into the parking lot, and when he parked, he noticed no one on his lead team was even driving a Ford. And some of you have heard that story. Isn't that nuts? They don't even buy their own product. And so he began to really talk about the cues that they gave off as senior leaders and encourage them to have a safe place to disagree respectfully and then find a way to work through disagreement and be better. Okay, so our teams need to know that they can boldly go for it after a goal and then just fall flat on their faces. And as long as they weren't negligent, and I don't believe in negligence, I just mean doing the best you can with what you had as you go into the unknown and then see what happens. And then not be condemned for that. So all of us in this room just simply need to do this. And this is how easy empowering is. Good morning, everybody. What are you working on today? And what do you need from me? And that's it. What's the big goal this week or this month? And what can I do to help you with that goal as a part of our broader vision for the organization? All right, so that's number 1, empower them. The second practical suggestion is about access. And I don't want you to miss the power of this. When we give people access into our lives, it honors and affirms them in an amazing way. Because we're telling them, hey, I value you enough that I would like you to be in it with me. Walk in my shoes for a day. Come around with me. I would like you to see what I deal with. And you know what? Then if you really want to knock their socks off, when something happens, say, what do you think I should do? What would you do here? And again, you don't have to do it, but just give them a chance. And you never know, it might be the best thought you've heard in a year, simply because you humbly said, what do you think? People feel valued at being included, especially when we ask their advice on things. All right. So here's another, the third one is another free one. By the way, these are all free. Can you tell I've been in state government for many years? These are all free. All right, they don't cost anything. The third one is learn about their lives. Now, behind the eyes of every person that we work with is a story. And this story is filled with joys, heartaches, successes, failures, challenges. And that's why getting to know them, and I mean safely, use your HR person, but safely going to them and encouraging them and getting to know them, just get to know them about who they are. We can be professional, we can be careful, but that lets them know, hey, I value enough to know something about your life. I see you and you matter to me. Okay, the last point, the fourth practical suggestion is the one I'm going to end on, is the most important of all. And you've been anticipating it, I'm sure. Over and over again, let your teams know that you appreciate them and you value them. There's so many ways to do this, even during a pandemic where many of us are at home. Notes of appreciation, handwritten. Frank Blake famously wrote over 25,000 of them when he 25,000 of them when he was CEO at Home Depot. And it changed their culture because a guy in the middle of nowhere at his Home Depot in America got a handwritten note from the guy at the top of the skyscraper in New York that didn't just say, hey buddy, good luck, Frank. It wasn't generic, it was specific. It was, dear Asa, I heard what you did to step in this month to meet the quota because your colleague got cancer. Thank you for that extra hour. It matters, it helped Frank. And it blew them away. And they began hanging them up at their stations. And Frank, because nobody knew what the boss looked like, out in the middle, because there's 200,000 employees, would walk through his stores. And guess what he saw? He would see his notes that he'd written hanging up at their workstations because it said, I'm valued by the boss. And guess what? For the worker over here who's maybe marginal, they walk up and they say, I want a note from the boss. And now guess what? Feedback opportunity. Well, you know what, Asa? Here's how you might get a note. If you did this, to work a little harder on that, and we can help you get a little better. Okay. So notes of appreciation, lunches as a team, even over Zoom, just talking over lunch on our computers. Send donuts to their home as a thank you. Honor them in front of each other. Huge one. Honor publicly always results in influence privately. And then being flexible, which we've really had to do this year. So I feel like we're doing good on that one. And then give them more time off, whatever. What would mean a lot to you? And as you get to know them, what would mean a lot to them where they feel appreciated and valued? So I'm going to close with a story where we tried to do this at the Transportation Cabinet. And like many good stories, it begins in the bathroom. So I had just used the restroom. I came out to wash my hands, and I've been there for almost a year. And I really noticed for the first time how immaculately clean the restroom was. It smelled good. Towels, we're never out of soap, never out of towels, never trash laying anywhere. I mean, this is a men's restroom. Okay, you won't get it. And it's great. And as I walked out, I thought, have we ever thanked the cleaning crew for the great job that they do? And not just good, but stellar. And so at our next lead team meeting, I just asked my leaders, I said, have we ever done this? And I had some people on lead team that were veterans, been there for about over a decade or two. And everybody said, not that I know of. So I said, here's what I want to do. What if we gave them gift cards, like $25 gift cards, and just wrote them a note, thank you for the great job you're doing for the lead team. Well, by bringing that idea to my team, they took it and made it better. And I'll skip all the middle, but here's what ended up happening. Their idea was, no, let's bring everybody in the building. We have 1,000 employees at the Transportation Cabinet and central office in Frankfurt. Let's bring everybody in. So they went back, everybody told their areas, this is what we're gonna do. And people got into it. And we got the names, because there were 6 people for day crew and 6 for night crew, evening crew, of the 2 people that worked on their floor. So they actually had 2 names that they knew did their bathrooms. And people began to give. And do you know what? We raised over $1,200, $100 each. Like, so I wanted to just do like 25. So they're going to get a $100 gift card. So we went and got them. And then we said, why don't we have them come down to the auditorium and we're going to surprise them and we're going to give them certificates and just thank them. Just thank them for doing a great job. So that's what we did. So the auditorium holds 250 people. And there were more than that in there because there were the walls were completely lined with people standing and then everybody else is sitting. So I guess I'd say 300 or so of the 1,000 people working there came down for this. It was going to be about 15 minutes. I went in, I got the day crew. They're panicked. They thought something was wrong. And that really bothered me, by the way, as a cue that I might give off, or they would think that, oh, senior leadership's here, we're in trouble. So I made a note, got to work on that. What's about to happen next is going to help. So we walk in and they're like, what is going on here? And as they walked in, people applauded and they started applauding because they didn't know that it was for them. So we go on stage, it quiets down, I got my mic and I just said, hey everybody, we just want to tell you as our cleaning crew staff, how much we appreciate what you do. And I gave just a little talk about how they're a part of our team. When we built the Louisville bridges, they were a part of that because when they're helping clean desks, clean the bathroom, they're doing things, they're freeing up everybody else to do what they came to do. Doesn't make one thing better than the other. It's just I came to do what I could do and give to the group, to the team. So anyway, we gave it to them, we handed them their certificates, and when we finished, we said their names, and then unplanned, when we finished, and it's funny because I've told this story like 20, 30 times, and still it gets me. People began to stand up and they gave them a standing ovation. Well, then people on the stage started crying. Then people in the audience began crying. And now I'm trying not to cry. I'm trying to keep it together, because we're all having this cry fest. And by the way, engineers don't cry, because we have most engineers. But you all, in all seriousness, that event unleashed honor and value in our culture in a way I never would have imagined. I wanted it to be good and like, hey, that's good, we value them. It exploded it across our culture. People began talking about it everywhere. I got over 15 emails from employees that were in the room, and then as well as on top of responses from some of the cleanup crew. And the thing is, well, I want to tell you about one email. This woman that was crying in the audience said she was weeping because her father had spent his life as a janitor. And even though his principal was good to him, he had never had anything happen to him like that. And she was standing there wishing we could have done that for her dad. And the last thought on that story, you all, is I would always try to talk to them. I learned the names of the people on my floor, and they didn't know who I was. But I would just be like, hey, Bill, good morning. And it would be, as they go by, I'd be like, hey, but you all, the next day when I saw them, I kid you not, they were coming on, they were pushing their carts, and they went, hey, Asa, good morning. They were holding their heads high because they knew that they were valued in our culture. No more, well, I'm over here, whatever self-disqualification that they had, they were valued. No more downward glances, chins up. Well, Horst Schulze, the founder of Ritz-Carlton, is the one who said that loyalty begins the moment somebody realizes you care for them. And that's why this is so important. All of these combine both seeing and hearing, the seeing and hearing of value to create a culture of honor and empowerment that uplifts every team member. So let's close this out. Ending 2020 well means intentionally doing those practices that empower and add value to our teams, equipping them to be successful. So what does ending well look like for your team? Your team. I've given you some examples to chew on. Here's a couple more. Maybe you need to help give some of them some hope. After such a hard year, just give them hope that better days are coming. We're going to get through this. Might not know how, but we will. Maybe it's time to have that hard conversation that you've been putting off with a coworker. Don't draw it out any longer. Don't let it linger and go into the new year. Remember, what we allow is what will continue, and what we don't address won't change. So as the leader, what do you need to do now to set yourself up and the team up for greater success next year? Well, as the founder and CEO of Great Leaders, I ask you to join me in doing the hard work of ending 2020 well, whatever that looks like for you and your team, as this year comes to a close. Remember that even though the modes of work have changed, our needs and our team's fundamental needs have not. And when we remember that everyone takes their cues from the senior leader, and we intentionally do the work of refueling ourselves each week, while also growing our self-awareness to give off healthy cultural cues, like valuing and honoring our teams, casting a strong vision for them, and empowering them, then we will become the leader that our teams want to follow. And then in turn, we will empower and equip them to do the same. So I hope you finish 2020 strong, and I wish you the best as this year ends well. So thank you, and now we have a few more minutes. I would love to take any questions that you all might have.
Thank you, Asa. Thank you so much. We did have one question in the chat, and I am going to ask this with a specificity. That is a real word.
Yeah.
So with this holiday season, as we're in it, can you give us one or two best ideas to honor teams, knowing they are also dealing with Zoom fatigue?
Yes, probably also mask fatigue. You all know your teams better than me, but I think it never goes old for me to get a handwritten note from the boss. Like sending them something in the mail, like not an email. And the fact that when they see that you hand wrote it, and I have terrible penmanship, so I really, actually my hand begins to hurt easily after I write for very long. I guess I'm trying to pat myself on the back and say it's a labor of love. Okay, I will break my arm doing that. But that's one that I would encourage you with to help, since you can't be there in person, giving them something, because it's also a gift, right? It's a gift of your time so if they're a quality time person, it's not just the words, but they're going to know, wow, and maybe even a gift person, they're going to know that you did that for them as a way to connect. That's not just virtual. I'm also, I whether it's gift baskets or finding a way just to be together, in a non-work setting, even unfortunately if it's Zoom, that's what I would try to do. Anything that takes away from the pattern that's developed this year. Great question. What else?
Thank you. And one final question.
Okay.
You've mentioned so many different quotes, and we could tell that you read frequently. Do you have any books on leadership that you recommend?
Sure. Well, I think that John Maxwell's 21 Laws of Leadership, I know it goes back, but it's classic. The Law of the Lid is basically talking about like everyone takes their cues from the senior leader, the senior leader sits as a lid. And while you can go around them a little bit, for the most part, they will set the culture. I just read my favorite new book. I'm so glad I thought of this. Is Liz Bohannon's Beginner's Pluck, and she's the founder of Seiko Designs, and she has amazing insight, especially as a millennial very successful business leader and thought coach, that I would recommend to you all. And then finally, let me just throw it. I mentioned difficult conversations. Leadership Louisville is going to do a talk on that next week, so I encourage you guys to come back for that. But also, Sheila Heen is incredible on feedback culture, and she's a Harvard researcher, and difficult conversations. Actually, I don't remember the name of her book, but Sheila Heen, H-E-E-N. I love her for helping equip us to do the hard stuff, like dealing with the negative stuff as well.
All right, well, I thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you again, Asa. This was a wonderful way to end out this year, 2020, with microlearning. And I will be following up everyone with an email with the information. I also have a one-pager that Asa has given me with contact information and the ways that you can get in touch with him. Asa did mention that next Monday, we have our leadership luncheon that is occurring. We have a spectacular lineup of mayors from Austin, Miami, and New Orleans. So if you have experienced our leadership luncheon in the past, it is continuing and it is happening on Monday. We also have on December 16th, a previous micro-learning speaker, Justin Patton. Justin Patton will be speaking on difficult conversations. And as we are going along and we're making sure that the year is finishing strong, we have launched our brochure for our January through June courses. So if you are looking for those, you can find those on our website, leadershiplouisville.org. I do want to shout out another microlearning speaker, Jeb Bates. He has a green room course that will be taught in February. So again, thank you all. I wish you all a happy holidays, happy end of the year, and we hope that you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you all and have a great day.